Story 1. The highway stretched out like a ribbon disappearing into the dark, the edges swallowed by a heavy pre-dawn fog. The truck's engine hummed in its low, steady rhythm, the kind of sound that could lull a driver into a trance if he let it. Headlights cut twin tunnels through the mist, catching the reflective paint of the lane markings, each white dash appearing, glowing for a heartbeat, then vanishing under the wheels. It had been hours since Michael had seen another vehicle. The world felt empty, hollowed out, as if the rest of humanity had gone to sleep and forgotten to wake up. His thermos sat in the cup holder, coffee long gone lukewarm, its bitter taste lingering in his mouth. Every so often he'd glance in the mirrors, nothing but darkness, soft and shapeless. The fog was thicker here, hugging the asphalt, making the world beyond the hood feel strangely distant. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, leaning forward, trying to pierce the haze. That's when he noticed it. At first, just a break in the pattern of white dashes ahead. Something not right. The painted lines seemed to move, his brow furrowed, eyes narrowing as the truck rolled closer. The next flash of high beams revealed a shape, a figure, slender, unmoving, standing directly over the center line as if it were a tightrope stretched across the world. A woman. Or, at least, she had the outline of one. She was facing away from him, her arms hanging loose at her sides. Her head tilted slightly to one side, like she was listening for something far off in the fog. The reflective paint of the lane marker ran directly beneath her feet, and she didn't seem to notice the glare of the oncoming headlights at all. Michael's first instinct was to slow down, but on this empty road, braking hard in the fog felt like asking for trouble. Instead, he eased off the accelerator, eyes locked on her silhouette. The strangest part wasn't that she was there. People broke down or got lost all the time. It was the way she stood perfectly still, perfectly balanced over that thin white line, as if the world to either side didn't exist. He flicked on the high beams, hoping the brighter light would make her step off to the shoulder. The glow washed over her, but her face was still a blur. No matter how close he got, no features took shape, only the faint suggestion of eyes, the pale oval of skin, and that head still tilted. The fog seemed to curl and shift around her, moving like smoke in a wind he couldn't feel. Michael's pulse picked up. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He reached for the air horn out of habit, but something in his gut told him not to. A heavy, sinking feeling that blasting the horn would make whatever this was turn toward him. And then, without moving her feet, she began to lean. Not forward, not backward, but toward the side of the truck's lane. Slowly, like a blade of grass bending under invisible weight. Her head turned just a fraction. Enough for him to feel, not see, the curve of a smile. A smile that didn't belong on a face he couldn't quite see. The coffee in his stomach felt suddenly sour. His brain screamed for him to accelerate, to just pass her and not look again. The fog pressed thicker against the windshield, swallowing the edges of the world, leaving only the glowing line and her. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just some lost hitchhiker. It felt like the road itself had decided to place her there. Michael's hands went clammy against the steering wheel. The woman hadn't moved for what felt like an eternity. And then, without warning, her head turned toward the cab. The fog seemed to peel away from her just enough for him to see the curve of her lips. And it was wrong. Too wide, too stretched. as if her skin had been pulled into a smile by some invisible hook. There was no warmth in it. No recognition, just a shape that mimicked joy in the most unnatural way. Her chin tilted downward, eyes locked on him. Though he couldn't see them clearly, he felt them. A heavy weight pressing through the glass, drilling into him. The rumble of the truck suddenly felt too loud in the cab, like it was competing with the sound of his own pulse. Then she shifted her weight, one slow step toward the shoulder, like she was finally going to leave the center line and melt back into the mist. Relief began to crawl into his chest, but it barely had time to settle. She moved again. This time, it wasn't slow. She lunged toward the right side of the road, straight toward the truck. And in the blink of an eye, she was no longer standing still. Michael's stomach dropped as the side mirror caught movement. She was running. Her feet barely seemed to touch the asphalt, yet somehow she kept perfect pace with the rig. And the speedometer needle was sitting at 80 kilometers an hour. That grin never broke, not once. Her hair whipped back, dark strands twisting in the fog, but her face, it stayed locked on him. He slammed his foot down, not on the brakes, but on the accelerator. The truck roared, tires hissing against the damp road. Still, she ran alongside. Her form didn't bob or sway like a normal runner. It was smooth, gliding, unnatural, as if her body was being pulled forward by something unseen. Michael tore his eyes back to the road, refusing to look again, but the mirror betrayed him. A flash of pale skin, that tilt of the head, the endless smile. It wasn't possible. He was already pushing 90, the engine straining, yet she was still there, not falling behind, not even breathing hard. The CB radio crackled with static, startling him so badly his hand jerked on the wheel. No voice came through, just a faint hiss, as if someone was holding the mic open on the other end. A whisper of movement in the background. He risked a glance at the mirror again and nearly choked on air. She was closer now, not at the far edge of the lane, but just outside the passenger door. So near he could see the shape of her teeth behind that stretched smile. The fog thickened around her like a curtain trying to hide the truth. Michael's breath came fast, shallow, his mind racing through options. He could call someone. But what would he say? There's a woman running beside my truck at 90 kilometers an hour, smiling like her face is about to split in half. Another burst of static on the CB. This time, beneath the hiss, came a sound. Soft, wet, like someone dragging their tongue slowly over dry lips. Michael's grip on the wheel turned his knuckles white. The road curved gently to the right, and for a moment she slipped out of his view. Relief pulsed through him, until he saw movement in the front of the truck. She wasn't running anymore. She was ahead of him. That same tilted head, that same smile, and the painted white line still ran beneath her feet. Michael's eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, no matter how much he told himself to just keep driving. She was there. Not far, not fading, but closer. The grin had widened somehow, stretching past the boundaries of a human face. Her lips looked paper-thin now, pulled so taut that the skin around them seemed ready to split. The headlights painted her in strobing flashes as the fog shifted, each beam catching her face for a split second before she was swallowed again, only to reappear closer. Her eyes, two dark wells that didn't blink, not once. Michael's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine growled in protest, and the long trailer behind him groaned as speed climbed higher. 95, 100. The road was little more than a ribbon of white lines floating in the mist. But he couldn't slow down, not with her there. In the mirror, her legs moved in quick, sharp strides, but they didn't match the rhythm of a normal runner. There was something jerky, almost broken about it. Yet she didn't stumble, didn't slow. If anything, she seemed to gain ground. The CB radio crackled again. The sound was thin this time, almost brittle, like the static had been stretched into a whisper. Michael's hand twitched toward the dial, but before he could reach it, the whisper took shape. "Don't turn." The words slithered through the speakers, so soft they barely existed, yet they crawled across his skin as if breathed right into his ear. Michael's throat went dry. He stared at the road ahead, willing himself not to check the mirrors again. But his gaze betrayed him. She was right there. Not 10 meters back now, maybe less. Her arms hung loose at her sides, fingers spread wide, as if she were about to leap. That tilted head never straightened, that smile never faltered, and those eyes, still unblinking, bore into him. The radio hissed once more. The same voice. "Don't turn." Michael gritted his teeth, forcing his focus forward. "Stay on the road, stay on the road," he muttered under his breath, the words barely audible over the pounding of his heart. He risked glancing at the speedometer. 105. The truck rattled with the effort, tires humming loud against the slick asphalt. The mist ahead swirled, shifting like it was alive. And for a heartbeat, Michael wondered if the fog itself was pushing her closer. "Don't turn." This time, the whisper came not from the radio, but from behind him, inside the cab. Michael's skin iced over. He didn't dare look in the passenger seat, didn't dare look at the sleeper berth. Every nerve screamed at him to not check, to keep his eyes locked on the highway. The mirror caught movement again. She was no longer running. She was gliding, feet barely brushing the ground, closing the gap inch by inch, the same stretched grin fixed like a mask. Michael's hands shook on the wheel. His mind clawed for logic. Maybe it was a trick of the fog. Maybe his eyes were playing games after too many hours on the road. But then the CB lit up once more, the signal meter peaking red, and he heard her voice, low, dragging, right against the mic. "You turn. You die." Michael's pulse roared in his ears. The highway curved gently to the left ahead, a white arrow painted on the pavement warning the change. The line she'd been following vanished into the mist as the curve approached. And still, she came closer. The curve loomed ahead, painted white arrows gliding toward him through the fog. Michael's hands clenched on the wheel, his knuckles pale against the black leather. Every muscle screamed not to do it. The words from the radio still lodged deep in his skull. "Don't turn." But instinct overrode the command. If she was behind him, maybe losing her in another direction was the only way. His heart pounded harder as the exit ramp appeared through the mist, a faded green sign pointing toward an older highway. Without thinking twice, he wrenched the wheel to the right. The trailer lurched, tires squealing on damp asphalt. The roar in his ears was deafening. Engine, wind, the high-pitched cry of rubber gripping wet road. For a heartbeat, Michael felt the truck tilt ever so slightly before it steadied, plunging into a new stretch of darkness. The fog was different here, thinner somehow, as if it had been left behind on the main route. The headlights caught cracked pavement, patches of weeds pushing through. No other vehicles, no lights, just an empty road and the echo of his own engine. Michael's breath came in ragged bursts. His pulse thudded in his throat. He forced himself to check the mirror. Nothing. The white line slid by, lonely and unbroken. The fog swallowed the horizon behind him. She was gone. Michael let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His grip on the wheel loosened, but only a little. Part of him expected her to burst out from the ditch or appear in the beam of his headlights ahead. The cab felt too quiet now, the CB radio nothing but a soft hiss. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. Then, movement. Up ahead, the road straightened, the beams from his headlights reaching further than before. And there, in the very center of the highway, was a figure. She stood with her back to him, right on the faded double yellow line, her silhouette perfectly still. The tilt of her head was gone now, her posture rigid, arms at her sides. Michael's stomach knotted. His foot hovered over the brake. The thought of slowing, of getting closer, felt like willingly stepping into a trap. Yet his speed carried him forward, the distance shrinking. 20 meters. 10. The light spilled across her back, picking up the faint outline of hair clinging to her shoulders. And then he saw it. The twitch. The corner of her mouth, just barely visible in the spill of light on her cheek, jerked upward. A tiny, sharp pull of skin that was unmistakably the start of a smile. Michael's breath caught. Every nerve told him to swerve, to put as much space between them as possible. But the road was narrow, bordered by steep ditches on both sides. There was nowhere to go. 5 meters. 3. The smile grew wider. Michael's eyes flicked away for a single heartbeat, to the shoulder, to the black void beyond the beams. And when he looked back, she was gone. The yellow line stretched empty before him. No footsteps, no shadow, no sign of her at all. The CB radio crackled, the static sharp enough to make him flinch. For a moment it was just noise. And then, so faint it could have been imagined, came a single, rasping breath. Then silence. Michael kept driving. He didn't slow down, didn't dare stop. The fog eventually swallowed the road again, but this time he didn't look in the mirror. Not once. Story 2. The road ahead was nothing but black ribbon and the faint glow of the dashed white lines. The kind of night where you start to feel like the world beyond your headlights doesn't even exist. Out here, in the middle of the desert, there's no city glow on the horizon, no neon gas station signs. Just you, the hum of the engine, and the endless dark. That's why I noticed it immediately. A light, way out there. At first, I thought it was a car cresting a hill. Maybe even another truck with its high beams on. But this wasn't moving. It just hung there. Steady, white, bright enough to pierce the black for miles. I kept glancing at it between the mile markers. Sometimes in the desert you see strange things. Mirages, heat bending the light, even reflections from far-off mines. But this wasn't the wavering shimmer of heat. This was a solid, fixed beam, like a massive spotlight pointed straight into the sky. I checked my clock, 2:30 in the morning, the kind of hour where nothing good happens. The CB was quiet. No chatter, no jokes from bored drivers, just static. A sign flashed past in my headlights. Rest area 2 miles. That was where the light seemed to be coming from. But I knew that stop. I'd been through here more times than I could count. It was a dirt pull-off with 2 picnic tables and 1 broken light pole that hadn't worked in years. It sure as hell didn't have anything that could throw a beam into the clouds like that. Still, the curiosity got under my skin. I slowed a little, leaning forward over the wheel as if that would help me see further. The desert opened up around me, flat as a tabletop, and that glow stood out like a fire in a cave. It didn't waver, didn't dim. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe road work, maybe someone set up floodlights for a night project. But in the back of my head, something whispered that it wasn't the kind of light humans put there. I rolled down the window, letting the cool desert air spill in. The smell out here is different at night, dry, metallic, and empty. But there was something else, a faint tang, almost like ozone before a storm. The beam was close now. I could see it wasn't just light. It was a column wide as a house, rising straight into the stars. And yet, when I glanced at the sky above it, there were no stars in that patch. Just a black void, as if something was blocking them out. My hands tightened on the wheel. I should have kept going. Every instinct said to pass that rest stop and never look back. But I kept the truck steady in the right lane, my turn signal clicking as I took the off-ramp toward the glow. Somewhere deep inside, I was already regretting it. The gravel crunched under the tires as I rolled off the ramp, my headlights sweeping over the empty pull-off. For a second, I thought the place was deserted. No other trucks, no cars, just the uneven dirt lot and the wind moving dust across the surface. And then I saw it. Not the beam. I was practically inside it now, so bright it washed out the edges of the world. No, what caught me was the shadow. It stretched away from a single metal pole, straight across the desert, so long that my eyes couldn't find where it ended. 2 miles, maybe more. You could have lined up 30 trucks nose to trailer on that black shape and still had room to spare. I eased the truck forward, my headlights grazing the base of the pole. It wasn't one of those light fixtures you see on highways. It was taller, much taller, and thicker, the kind of industrial steel you'd expect at a radio tower. But it was bare. No cables, no dish, no lamp at the top. Just smooth metal vanishing upward into the light. And here's the thing. I knew this rest stop. I'd parked here twice before, once during a sandstorm, once when my logbook forced me to. There was no pole here. Not last year, not last month. Nothing but the busted light post and the leaning restroom sign. I killed the engine. Without the rumble of the diesel, the silence hit like a wall. Out in the desert, even at night, there's usually something. A cricket, a gust, the far-off whine of a highway. Here there was nothing. Not even the sound of my own breath seemed right. The shadow didn't waver. It didn't shift with the beam. It just was, as if it had been painted onto the earth itself. I stepped down from the cab, boots hitting the dirt. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and the ozone tang was sharper, almost electric. I squinted upward, following the pole into the glare. My eyes watered, and for a split second I thought I saw something move in the light. Not a bird, not a plane, just a shape. Slow, deliberate. A memory flashed, something my uncle once told me when I was a kid, about how shadows could tell you more about an object than light ever could. I don't know why that thought stuck, but now it seemed like the only thing I could focus on. I walked toward the edge of the lot, trying to follow the shadow. The ground dipped slightly, and the dark shape seemed thicker, more solid, as if you could almost trip over it. I crouched and pressed my hand into it. The dirt felt cold, not nighttime desert cool, freezer cold. Somewhere far off in the black, a faint metallic groan rolled toward me, deep enough to vibrate in my chest. It was coming from the direction the shadow pointed. I straightened slowly, my instincts shouting that I had just crossed some invisible line. The pole loomed behind me, impossibly tall, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever cast that shadow was not standing on the ground. And it was closer than it had been a moment ago. The diner's neon buzzed faintly above me, casting its tired glow over the chipped counter. Only 2 other people sat inside. A man in a ball cap nursing black coffee at the far end, and the waitress, who looked like she'd been on shift since 1974. I slid into a booth by the window, my back to the wall, habit from too many lonely nights on the road. The coffee was hot, bitter, and welcome. I just started to relax when the first tremor rolled through the floor. It was subtle at first, just a faint vibration in the cup, the surface of the coffee shivering in tiny concentric rings. I thought maybe a truck was idling too close to the building, but the sound was wrong. Lower, hungrier. Then it came again, harder this time, rattling the silverware and sending a fork clattering to the linoleum. The guy in the cap looked up, frowning, but said nothing. The third one hit like a heartbeat under the earth. The windows gave a sharp metallic tick, the kind they make before they crack. I felt it through the seat, through my boots, all the way up my spine. That's when the light outside changed. It wasn't the slow, gradual shift of dawn. It was instant, like someone had twisted the dimmer on the world. I turned toward the window and froze. The pole was moving, not swaying, not tilting in the wind, moving, rising. The base of it, the part I'd stood beside not 20 minutes ago, was no longer in the dirt lot. It was lifting away, dragging the earth with it like a claw, tearing up carpet. Chunks of asphalt hung from the ground, snapping free and tumbling into the dust. I stood so fast the coffee sloshed onto the table. The waitress said something sharp behind me, but I didn't hear. My eyes were locked on the impossible sight, the entire rest stop groaning as fissures split across the parking lot. The other trucks shuddered in their spaces, chains rattling, as if they knew what was happening before we did. One rig tilted suddenly, its rear wheels dangling over nothing as the slab of pavement beneath it tore free. The sound, I'll never forget it. A metallic roar mixed with the deep, endless moan of stressed rock. Not wind, not engines. Like the sky itself was pulling. The pole climbed higher, and I could see now it wasn't smooth at all. It was segmented, like the spine of some enormous creature. And somewhere far above, where the light flared brightest, something vast and circular hung in the air, its edges barely visible against the night. It was lifting the lot. The truck stop, the entire thing, was rising, asphalt curling upward like a page in a book. Dust and gravel spiraled upward, caught in a column of invisible force. I stumbled back from the window, heart hammering, as the man in the cap bolted for the door. I almost called after him. But then I saw what waited outside. Beyond the edge of the lot, where the desert should have been, there was nothing. Just darkness, as if the ground had been erased. The waitress finally spoke, her voice low and trembling like she'd seen this before. "Once it takes off," she said, "it don't come back down." And then the floor shifted under my boots, and the whole diner began to rise. It happened so fast, I almost didn't believe it. One moment, the diner was shuddering, plates leaping from the shelves, the pole tearing the earth away like a hook snagging fabric. The next, silence. Not quiet in the normal way. Quiet in the way of an empty theater after the lights go out. No hum from the neon sign, no rattle of cups, no sound of air moving through vents. It was as if someone had sucked all the noise from the world. I blinked. The window in front of me was no longer filled with a truck stop, the parked rigs, the endless desert night. It was dirt. Bare, torn dirt. I stumbled outside, boots crunching in loose soil. The lot, the diner, the fuel pumps, they were gone. All of it. In their place, a raw wound in the earth stretched wider than a football field, the edges jagged where chunks of asphalt had been ripped up like puzzle pieces. It looked like the place had never existed at all, as if the highway had always run past this barren patch. My breath came in short bursts, each one echoing in my own ears like I was standing in a cave. The man in the cap was gone. The waitress was gone. Even the other trucks, the ones I'd passed in the lot, gone without a trace. I felt my pulse in my teeth. The air smelled wrong too. Not fuel, not dust, but something metallic, like hot copper and rain. I walked forward without thinking, my boots dragging faint lines through the loose earth. The highway was still there, its cracked blacktop cutting past the empty space, but it seemed smaller now, lonelier. Then I saw them. Far out, against the ink-black sky, tiny points of light were moving upward. Slowly, almost lazily, but steady. At first I thought it was a plane, but they didn't blink like navigation lights. They pulsed, a faint reddish glow, like embers drifting up from a dying fire. There must have been a dozen of them, maybe more, each one the size of a truck headlamp from this distance. I realized with a cold, crawling certainty that those lights were rising from where the pole had gone. The desert wind picked up, but it didn't touch me. It was moving around me, curling away like I was standing behind glass. The ground still felt too warm under my feet. One of the lights flared brighter for just a second, and I swear I saw the outline of something vast, so vast it blocked the stars, before it faded again. It was going higher, higher into the dark, carrying whatever it had taken with it. And then it was gone. No sound of engines, no sonic boom, no fading rumble, just the empty patch of dirt, the smell of metal, and the faint memory of red lights climbing into the void. I stood there until my knees ached, waiting for something, anything, to return. But nothing did. When I finally climbed back into my truck, my headlights swept over the barren ground, and for just a second, I thought I saw movement. A shadow, impossibly tall, standing where the pole had been. But when I blinked, it was only the darkness. A couple of hours later, the highway was blocked off by the military. Convoys of trucks rolled in from both directions, diesel engines rumbling low in the night. There were far too many men in camouflage for an ordinary accident. They were setting up metal barricades, unloading strange equipment from the vehicles. Over the radios came clipped orders. Isolate the site, jam all transmissions. One soldier glanced at me and motioned for me to keep my distance. By morning, rumors were spreading online. Some claimed to have seen a massive shadow in the sky. Others spoke of a beam of light lifting everything upward. But one word kept repeating in the comments: UFO. Story 3. The night pressed down like a weight. the kind of darkness that eats the horizon and leaves only the narrow strip of asphalt ahead. The truck's headlights carved two pale tunnels through the black, their beams swallowed quickly by the void. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for a single lane in each direction, flanked by fields that stretched endlessly on either side. Corn, maybe, or wheat. In the darkness, it was just a restless sea of stalks shifting in the wind. The CB was silent. No chatter, no music, only the steady hum of the engine and the soft hiss of tires on cracked asphalt. This was the kind of route most drivers avoided at night. Too many blind curves, too many unmarked intersections, too far from anything that felt like civilization. But the highway had been closed for construction, and this back road was the only way through. The air outside looked thicker than fog, though it was clear. More like the darkness itself had a texture, clinging to the edges of the headlights. The driver kept glancing at the ditches on either side, making sure no deer or stray cattle wandered into his path. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, maybe 100 yards, just at the edge where his lights faded into black, something stood still. At first, it was only a shape, a pale dot in the dark. As the truck rolled closer, details emerged. It was a boy, small, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He stood on the narrow strip of grass between the road and the ditch, not moving, not waving, not doing anything at all. His arms hung at his sides, and his head was tilted forward just enough that the shadow from his brow hid his eyes. His clothes, if you could call them that, looked old. A white shirt stained dark in patches, shorts that hung unevenly, one sock missing. The strangest thing wasn't that he was out there at this hour, or that there were no houses, no cars, no street lights for miles in either direction. It was the way he was standing, like he'd been waiting. The driver eased off the gas, the engine's growl softening. The boy didn't react, not a flinch, not a glance. Just stood there, staring straight into the beams of the truck. There's a rule among truckers. You don't stop for people in the middle of nowhere unless there's no choice. Too many stories, too many setups, too many ways to end up robbed, or worse. But the driver found himself slowing anyway, his hands tightening on the wheel. Something about the boy's stillness was wrong, but something else. Something quieter whispered that maybe this was an emergency. The truck crept closer, the fields on either side whispering in the wind. The boy's shirt fluttered slightly, but his body didn't move. The driver's high beams hit him full on now, bleaching his skin in stark white. His face was pale, his mouth closed, and, yes, his eyes were open. They were fixed directly on the driver. A shiver ran through him. He eased into the other lane to pass wide, watching the boy in the corner of his vision. For a moment, he considered stopping. Maybe there was a wreck nearby. Maybe the kid was lost. But the boy's head turned slightly as the truck passed, just enough for the driver to feel it, like a hook catching his spine. The boy was still watching, and his lips moved. The driver couldn't hear the words over the engine, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever the boy had said, it was meant for him. The truck had rolled just past him when the driver saw it. Movement in the side mirror. Small, deliberate. The boy had lifted one hand. Not a wave. Not a plea. His fingers curled slowly toward himself in a slow, beckoning motion. The universal gesture for come here. The driver's foot hovered over the brake without thinking. The road ahead was empty, the darkness thick and unbroken. That pull, half curiosity, half dread. It was like a rope around his chest. He wasn't the kind of man who ignored kids in trouble. But something in the way the boy moved didn't sit right. It was too slow, too careful. The mirror caught his face now, lit in the truck's red taillights. His skin was almost the same color as his shirt, pale, flat, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. And those eyes, they were wrong. Not just dark, but solid. No whites, no reflection of light, like two black marbles pressed into a porcelain doll's face. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. The fields on either side seemed quieter now, the sound of the tires louder against the cracked pavement. He glanced back again. The boy was still there, arm raised, fingers curling toward himself in that same slow rhythm. "Come here. Come here." The CB crackled suddenly, a burst of static that made the driver flinch. No voice, just that empty hiss, as if the signal had been swallowed by the night. He checked the road ahead. Still nothing. Just the single yellow line stretching forward, disappearing into black. He slowed. Not much, but enough to let the thought grow. What if he really is lost? What if there's a car wreck in the ditch? Out here, a kid could freeze, or worse. And if he drove away and found out later that the boy had died, the guilt would follow him for the rest of his life. He flicked on the hazard lights and downshifted, the truck growling in protest. The boy took one step forward, just one. That was all it took for the driver's stomach to tighten. The movement was too smooth, too steady. No hesitation, no stumble like you'd expect from a scared child in the dark. His head stayed tilted the same way, his gaze locked. The driver reached toward the passenger seat, where his heavy flashlight lay, the kind with a steel handle you could use as a weapon if you had to. He told himself it was just in case, just a precaution. The truck came to a stop about 20 yards ahead of the boy. The engine idled, the night pressing in. He could see more of the boy now. Thin legs, bare knees scratched with dirt, one shoe missing entirely. His lips didn't move, but the driver swore he could feel words hanging in the air, unspoken but heavy. "Come here." The driver's fingers brushed the door handle. He hesitated. That's when the boy's arm fell to his side, limp, like a puppet string had been cut. He took another step forward, then another, each one soundless on the pavement. The driver swallowed. If he was going to move, it had to be now. He flicked on the high beams and froze. The light washed over the boy's face in full for the first time. The skin was pale, yes, but it wasn't skin at all. It was smooth, unbroken, almost plastic. And the eyes, still black, still fixed, reflected nothing, not even the truck's glare. The boy stopped walking, his head tilted farther to one side, too far for any living neck. And then, slowly, his arm came back up. "Come here." The driver's boots hit the pavement with a dull thud, the night air immediately heavier outside the cab. Cold, too. Colder than it had been inside, like the fields themselves were holding their breath. He kept the flashlight low, its beam cutting a thin path through the dark. The boy didn't move at first. He just stood there, head still tilted, watching. Then, without a sound, the boy turned. One quick pivot and he was running, bare feet slapping the cracked road, heading toward a shape barely visible beyond the edge of the field. A weathered barn, half hidden in shadow. "Hey, wait!" the driver called, his voice sounding small against the vast stillness. But the boy didn't slow. The driver cursed under his breath and followed, boots crunching over gravel, then sinking slightly into the soft dirt at the edge of the field. The smell changed here. Less of asphalt and diesel, more of old wood and something else. Something faint, metallic, like rust. The barn loomed closer, its wide double doors slightly open. The boy slipped inside without touching them, as though the gap had been made for him alone. The driver hesitated. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But there was that other voice, the one that wouldn't let him walk away from a kid in trouble. He stepped up to the doors, pushing them open just enough to slide inside. The flashlight beam swept across dirt floors, thick wooden beams, and a haze of dust swirling lazily in the cold air. It smelled stronger in here, like damp earth and iron. And then the light caught something. Someone. A man stood 10 feet away, facing the far wall. He didn't move, didn't react to the light. The driver took a cautious step closer. That's when he saw the others. Another figure, and another. Rows of them, stretching toward the back of the barn. Men, women, maybe a dozen in total, all standing perfectly still, all facing the same direction, their heads slightly bowed. The driver's breath caught. His beam traced along their bodies. Some wore work clothes, others were dressed like they'd come from a night out. All of them were dusty, clothes stiff and torn. Their skin looked wrong. Not pale like the boys, but grayish, sunken, stretched thin over bone. Hello? The word left his mouth before he could stop it. No answer. The boy was there too, now standing at the very front of the rows, his back to the driver, facing the same point on the far wall as the others. The driver edged sideways, trying to see what they were looking at. The light skimmed across warped boards and peeling paint, then landed on something carved deep into the wood. A circle. Inside it, a jagged shape like lightning or a crooked branch, fresh enough that the wood was still raw and pale around the grooves. The driver stepped closer, pulse hammering in his ears. That's when he noticed every single figure's chest was rising and falling. Barely. Slow. They weren't statues. They were breathing. And then, as one, every head began to turn, not toward the symbol on the wall, but toward him. The boy was the last to move. When his face came into view, the driver saw that the black, empty eyes were no longer just watching. They were reflecting the flashlight's beam, but in a way no human eye could. Like mirrors in a deep well, catching light and pulling it inward. The boy raised his arm again. Come here. The barn felt smaller now, like the walls had shifted inwards when he wasn't looking. The air was heavier, colder, each breath carrying that strange iron tang deeper into his lungs. The boy didn't move for a long moment, his small frame still at the head of the silent crowd. Then he turned, slowly, almost mechanically, until those black, mirror-like eyes locked on the driver. His lips parted, and the sound that came out wasn't the voice of a child. It was too low, too hollow, like it had been dragged up from somewhere deep in the ground.
Look at the bodies.
The words slithered through the still air, soft yet loud enough to push everything else out of the driver's mind. And they obeyed. Every single figure, all at once, moved. Not fast, just an unnatural, perfect unison. Their heads turned toward him, the motion smooth, deliberate, as though a single mind was behind all of them. The driver's flashlight trembled in his hand, the beam jittering across hollow eyes and faces drained of anything living. They weren't blinking. None of them. He took a step back, boots scuffing the dirt, the sound impossibly loud in the hush. No one followed, but their gaze was fixed on him, pinning him in place more effectively than chains could. "What do you want?" His own voice cracked, sounding small against the weight of theirs. The boy didn't answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head, just slightly, mimicking the posture he'd had back on the roadside. And then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a child. It was too slow in forming, too wide, stretching until it seemed like his skin might tear.
Stay.
The driver's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to turn and run, but his legs felt locked, heavy as stone. The figures took one step forward, all together, the sound of many feet on dirt like a muffled drum beat. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out entirely. Darkness swallowed the barn. For a heartbeat, the only sound was his own breathing, fast and shallow. Then came another, quieter, closer, the sound of breathing that wasn't his. Something brushed his sleeve. He staggered back, slamming into a wooden post. In the pitch black, dozens of soft, deliberate footfalls began to close in from every direction. He reached for the door, hands fumbling against rough wood, nails catching splinters. The latch stuck. Behind him, the boy's voice came again, right by his ear this time, no more than a whisper.
Look at the bodies.
The words carried something inside them, something that slid cold and heavy into his mind. He turned. He didn't want to, but his body moved on its own. The flashlight came back to life without his touching it. The beam now aimed low, casting light up across their faces from below. They were closer. So close he could see the faint rise and fall of their chests, the tiny twitches in the muscles of their jaws. Every single one was smiling now. Thin-lipped, teeth pressed together, eyes unblinking. The boy reached out a pale, small hand and pointed toward the far wall. There were more figures there now, ones he was certain hadn't been in the barn a moment ago. His heart lurched when he realized he recognized one of them. It was him. Standing among them, eyes black, smiling just like the rest. The flashlight clattered to the floor. And in the sudden dark, the last thing he felt was dozens of cold hands finding him in unison. Story 4. The road stretched out like a ribbon of dark glass under the tires, endless and quiet. Out here, between two nameless towns in the middle of nowhere, the night was heavy. The kind of heavy that made even the CB chatter fade away. The only sounds were the low growl of the engine and the faint rattle of something in the glove compartment. He reached for the radio, not to find anything in particular, just to fight off the slow creep of fatigue. Static hissed, a thin whisper between stations. He twisted the dial, moving past bursts of country music, late-night talk shows, more static. Then, somewhere between a dead frequency and another fading station, a melody slipped through. It was soft at first, old, analog, like it was coming from a mile underwater. A piano, slow, deliberate. A woman's voice, warm and aching. And the moment it hit his ears, his hands froze on the wheel. It wasn't just any song, it was that song. The same one that had played on a cassette deck at the church the day they lowered his brother into the ground. The one their mother had chosen, said it was the only thing gentle enough to match his soul. A song he hadn't heard in over 15 years, and never wanted to hear again. His chest tightened. He turned the volume down, then up again, just to be sure. The lyrics were the same, the tempo exactly as he remembered. Every word pulled him back to that day. The smell of flowers and rain on the church steps, the sound of dirt hitting the coffin lid, the sight of his father staring straight ahead with empty eyes. But there was something wrong. The announcer came on between verses. The voice was calm, low, almost too low, and it had that dusty tone of AM stations that hadn't been updated since the 70s. You're listening to Vokzal FM, where the night never ends. Then, after a pause that seemed just a little too long, for those still traveling, we see you. The hairs on his arms rose. He glanced at the digital tuner, 87.4. That wasn't even a valid FM frequency in this part of the country. He adjusted the dial, but no matter which way he turned it, the station stayed locked in, like the knob wasn't even connected anymore. The song kept playing. The voice kept singing. And in the reflection of the windshield, just above the hood, he thought he saw something. A faint shape in the blackness above the road. A perfect black circle hanging in the air. It didn't move, didn't shimmer like heat. It was just there, a hole in the night sky, about 50 feet above the asphalt. He blinked, and it was gone. The song ended, replaced by the same slow static. No DJ, no ads, just dead air. Then, as he was about to switch back to the CB, the announcer's voice came one last time. We're still here, and so is he. His hands tightened on the wheel. The dash clock flicked forward by 2 minutes, though it felt like only seconds had passed. The road ahead was still empty, still dark. But now every instinct screamed at him to keep driving, and not, under any circumstances, to look up again. He almost didn't notice at first when the music faded. It wasn't the smooth kind of fade radio stations use. It just drained away, like water slipping through a crack. The static swelled for a moment, and then the announcer's voice returned. Only this time, it was different. Good evening, Thomas, the voice said, smooth as silk, but heavy with something colder beneath. He gripped the wheel hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Thomas. He hadn't heard his name said like that since his mother's voice had grown too weak to call him in from the yard. The voice didn't stop. We remember when you got that red bicycle for your 8th birthday. You rode it down the hill by Peterson's farm and crashed into the fence. Thomas felt his throat tighten. That was real. That was his life. He could still picture the bent spokes, the splinter in his palm, the way his brother had laughed until their father told him to shut it. The radio crackled again, and the DJ chuckled, a warm sound that turned sour in an instant. We've been watching you for a long time, Thomas, and we know. You've been watching the road, trying not to think about us. But we think about you. Every mile. A chill rolled down his back, settling in the base of his spine. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't CB chatter bleeding into the FM band. This was direct. The voice lowered, almost whispering into the cab. You're close now. So close. 3 miles, Thomas. That's where the source is. That's where you can see for yourself. He wanted to shut the radio off, to rip the damn thing out of the dash if he had to. But his hand wouldn't move. His foot eased off the accelerator without him thinking about it. The mile markers slid past. 3.4, 3.3, 3.2. The voice kept talking. We've been waiting at the edge of the field. You'll see the circle, floating above the wires. You'll hear the rest of the song. Thomas swallowed hard, the taste of copper creeping onto his tongue. Every instinct screamed to keep going, to push past mile 0 and never look back. But another part of him, the part that had driven all night more times than he could count, chasing something just to see where it ended, leaned toward the mystery, and maybe toward the voice. The CB sputtered to life for half a second, a driver's voice breaking through. "Anyone else getting that?" Before the station drowned it out again with a burst of static. "You're almost here," the announcer said softly. "Don't worry about the others. We'll talk, just you and us." The blacktop stretched ahead, a faint glow beginning to bloom on the horizon. It wasn't the pale sodium light of a rest stop. It wasn't headlights either. It was colder, steadier, and too high in the air to be coming from anything on the ground. 3 Mile. That's what the voice had said. And Thomas realized, with a hollow weight in his chest, that he was going to see it. No matter what waited there, he wasn't going to turn away. The glow grew clearer with each curve in the road. It wasn't flickering like a bulb. It was constant, like the unwavering gaze of something that didn't need to blink. Thomas kept the truck centered on the fading asphalt, his headlights struggling against the darkness, pressing in on both sides. The announcer's voice had gone silent, but the old funeral song was playing again. It was quieter now, almost tucked beneath the rumble of the engine, as if the station didn't want to scare him off too soon. A green road sign, pitted with rust and buckshot, appeared in his lights. Foster Station, 0.5 miles. He'd never heard of it. He'd been through this part of the state dozens of times and had never once seen the name. The air changed before the town appeared. Cooler, heavier, as if the night itself had dropped down a few degrees. His ears popped, the way they did when driving into the mountains. Then the headlights swept across rows of black windows. The station sat hunched on the left side of the road, like it had been waiting for him. The brick was crumbling, the platform half swallowed by weeds. The ticket window was a jagged hole of glass, and the old station sign dangled from one chain, squeaking lazily in the breeze. But it wasn't the station that pulled at his eyes. Beyond the building, framed against the darker black of the sky, was a water tower. Its rusted frame rose like a skeleton into the night. But halfway up, bolted to the side, hung a perfect black circle, not painted, not shadowed. It was too perfect. Thomas slowed to a crawl, easing the truck to the edge of the gravel shoulder. The circle was maybe 12 feet across, matte and flawless, and it didn't reflect the lights from the cab. It didn't reflect anything. The tower's floodlight, still clinging to its post in defiance of time, shone directly across it, but instead of lighting it, the beam vanished into its surface. The air felt wrong here. His breath came out in shorter bursts, clouding faintly despite the warmth of the night. The music on the radio warped, the singer's voice bending out of tune like warped vinyl. He stared up at the thing, realizing the glow he'd followed wasn't light at all. It was the absence of it. The blackness had its own pull, a visual gravity that tugged his focus and wouldn't let it go. Then, from somewhere deep inside the static, the voice returned. "Closer, Thomas." It wasn't through the speakers this time. It was inside the cab, inside his ears, as if someone sat just behind the driver's seat, leaning in to speak softly. "You see it now? You understand? It's been here for a long time. Just like we've been waiting for you." Thomas gripped the door handle without realizing it. He told himself he was going to get out, just to take a look, to prove there was nothing to fear. But the truth was, he already knew he was going to walk straight toward it. The black circle didn't move, didn't breathe. but it felt alive in a way the rest of the world didn't, as if everything else around it was the dream, and this was the only real thing left. The music stopped. The silence was deeper than silence had any right to be. At first, he thought it was just his eyes adjusting to the darkness, that maybe the longer he stared at the circle, the more his mind began to fill in shapes that weren't there. But then, the shapes moved. They weren't on the surface of the blackness. They were inside it. A faint depth emerged, like peering down a well where no bottom should be. The silhouettes were hard to count. They shifted and overlapped, sometimes breaking apart into smaller forms, sometimes joining together into a single, swaying mass. Thomas leaned forward over the steering wheel, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. The metal frame of the water tower groaned faintly in the night air. One of the figures separated from the rest. It stepped closer, or perhaps drifted, the way shadows might slide across a wall without touching it. It stopped near the edge of the black. And then, it raised an arm. The motion was slow, deliberate. A small sway of the wrist followed, almost lazy. Thomas felt something tear in his chest, recognition striking with a sharp, physical ache. That wave, that simple, awkward little motion, was something he had seen hundreds of times. His brother Mark had always waved like that, ever since they were kids, standing at the end of the driveway when Thomas drove off for school or later for his long hauls. The memory slammed into him with the force of a head-on collision. The way Mark's hand would tilt just so, the little half-smile that came with it. But Mark had been gone for 11 years, buried on a rainy Tuesday in March. The silhouette held its position. Behind it, the other shapes seemed to press forward, though none crossed that invisible threshold between their world and his. The radio clicked back to life, not with music this time, but with Mark's voice. "Come on, Tommy. You've been driving long enough. Time to come home." Thomas's mouth went dry. He didn't remember opening the truck door, but cold air swept against his face and hands, and the crunch of gravel under his boots told him he was already on the ground. The black circle loomed above, silent but thrumming with something he felt more in his bones than in his ears. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but his legs kept moving. The closer he got, the more the air thickened, resisting his steps like water. It carried no temperature, no wind, just a weight, as if each breath had to be pushed into his lungs by force. Mark's silhouette was still there, unmoving except for that slow wave. "Mark," Thomas whispered, the sound barely more than breath. And then, the figure stepped forward. For a fraction of a second, the surface of the circle rippled, as though disturbed from within. The shadow broke through, and for just long enough to etch itself forever into Thomas's mind. The darkness gave way to a depthless place, neither night nor space, but an absence where color and time did not exist. Mark's face was there, pale and impossibly close. His eyes were exactly as Thomas remembered, warm, knowing. The voice came again, this time not through the radio, not in his ears, but inside his head, clear as the day they'd last spoken. "It's all right. Just one step." Thomas reached the ladder of the water tower without realizing it. His hand gripped the first rung. The circle swelled in his vision until it was the only thing that existed. And in the final instant before his foot left the ground, the blackness seemed to smile. Story 5. The rain had been falling since sundown, the kind of steady, unbroken downpour that turns a windshield into a shifting sheet of silver. I had pulled into a rest area I'd never used before, just off a narrow 2-lane highway that seemed to run straight into the dark. It was well past midnight, and the lot was empty except for my rig, the yellow glow of a single lamppost struggling to reach across the wet asphalt. I killed the engine, but the world outside didn't go quiet. The rain kept drumming against the glass, against the hood, against the roof. It was a sound that swallowed every other sound, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat back in the driver's seat, rubbing my eyes. My logbook said I'd been driving for 11 hours straight. My body agreed. My plan was simple: close the curtains, grab 4 hours of sleep, and be on the road before dawn. Nothing about this stop felt special until I heard it. Michael. My name. Spoken quietly, but clear enough to cut through the rain. My eyes flicked toward the passenger side window, but all I saw was the dark outline of the side mirror and the glitter of water streaming down the glass. I told myself it was the rain, maybe the wind playing tricks, the way it sometimes shapes random noise into something your brain mistakes for a voice. I reached for the bunk curtain and froze. Michael, it's me. I couldn't breathe for a second. That voice, I knew that voice. The deep, calm tone, the weight in the way it said my name. It was my father's voice, and my father had been missing for 12 years. No funeral, no goodbye. One day he was there, the next he wasn't. A ghost that had never even died. My fingers stayed curled around the curtain, but I didn't pull it closed. I just stared at the wet, black glass of the side window, the way it reflected the faint yellow lamplight from outside. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the rain for a moment. Dad? My own voice was barely above a whisper. The reply came immediately, so close it sounded like the speaker was leaning right up to the window. Come outside, son. I need to see you. The words slid under my skin like cold water. The tone was almost right, almost. But there was something just a little too even, a little too careful about it. My father used to speak with warmth, with small rises and falls, the kind of human imperfection you don't notice until it's gone. This voice, it was like someone imitating him after listening to a recording 1,000 times. I swallowed hard and glanced at the rearview mirrors. Nothing. Just the black blur of rain and the sodium light. But the voice came again, slow and patient. Michael, open the door. And that's when I noticed something strange. The rain on the passenger side glass wasn't moving the same way it was everywhere else. The streams didn't slide down. They bent outward, as if something outside was pressing against the window, just enough to warp the patterns of the water. I leaned forward, squinting through the darkness. And that's when the outline appeared. A shape, a head and shoulders, too close to the glass to see anything but a pale blur of skin and the faint suggestion of eyes. I stayed frozen like that, breath fogging the inside of the cab, until the voice spoke one more time. Soft, almost tender. Please, son, just let me in. The rain didn't stop. It never even slowed. I didn't want to turn my head. Every nerve in my body told me not to. That whatever was out there, whatever was pressing its presence against my window, was better left unseen. But the voice came again, quiet but insistent, like a hook tugging at my spine. Michael, look at me. Slowly, I turned toward the passenger side glass. The rain smeared everything into streaks of gold and shadow from the lamplight. but through it, a face began to take shape. Pale, far too pale, almost gray, as if it had never felt the warmth of sunlight. The skin looked stretched, pulled tight over sharp bones. The eyes. I expected my father's eyes. Warm brown, always carrying that faint hint of amusement. But these were flat, glassy, a shade between black and deep water. And they didn't blink. The lips moved. They didn't match the faint light outside, didn't match the way water ran down over them. But they moved perfectly in time with my father's voice. "Come on, son. Open the door. It's cold out here." I pressed myself back into the driver's seat, my left hand gripping the wheel so hard the leather creaked. This wasn't my father. It couldn't be. But the longer I stared, the more little details began to creep out into my brain. The way the mouth curled on certain words. The tiny scar on the left side of the chin. My father had gotten it shaving when I was a kid. This thing had it too. The rain kept running down the glass, distorting the features just enough to keep me from seeing them in perfect clarity. That almost made it worse, my mind filling in the gaps with memories. "Michael, it's been so long. You've gotten older." The voice sounded closer now, as if it were inside the cab. But the lips outside kept moving, almost lagging, like a badly synced film. A shiver ran down my spine, sharp as ice. I glanced at the side mirror, thinking maybe I could catch a different angle. But in the mirror, the space outside the window was empty. Nothing but rain. I looked back. The face was still there. Closer now. So close that if there hadn't been glass between us, I could have felt its breath. But the glass stayed dry right where the lips were. Not a single drop clung to that patch. My mouth went dry. "You're not him." The thing smiled, not wide, not grotesque, but slow, like it was pleased I had spoken. Its lips kept moving in perfect rhythm with my father's voice. "You always were stubborn, but you're still my boy." Something shifted behind the face, in the darkness beyond the glass. A faint ripple, like movement in water. For a moment, I thought I saw another face in the shadows, watching from just behind the first one. Then the rain swelled, a heavier burst slapping against the window, and it was gone. The pale face leaned forward until the skin nearly touched the glass. The eyes were huge now, reflecting the dim yellow of the lamplight in a way no human eyes should. The voice dropped to a whisper so low I had to lean in to hear. "Don't make me knock." I jerked back, heart pounding, staring at the glass. The rain never stopped. The face never blinked. The words froze in my chest before they could become breath. "You will drive after me." Not a question, not a request, a command, spoken in my father's voice, deep and familiar enough to hit every locked-away memory in my head. I wanted to say something back, to tell it that it wasn't him, that I knew better. But my tongue felt heavy, useless. My eyes stayed fixed on that pale face, each drop of rain distorting its edges until it seemed to melt into the glass. Then, slowly, it began to drift backward into the dark. Not like someone stepping away, but like an image sinking into deep water, fading until only the shape of the head remained. And then, that was gone too. For a heartbeat, there was only the rain. Then I heard them. Steps. Wet, deliberate steps in the black beyond the beam of my headlights. A splash here, a faint ripple there. The sound moved slow, circling just at the edge of vision, as if whatever owned those steps wanted me to know it was still there. I gripped the wheel tighter. My knuckles were already white, but my fingers wouldn't let go. The cab felt smaller, air thicker, the smell of damp metal and old coffee grounding me only barely in reality, from somewhere beyond the light. It's been too long, Michael. You never came looking for me. The words weren't muffled now. They came as clear as if the speakers sat right beside me. My chest tightened. You're not him, I said. But it sounded more like a plea than a statement. A faint laugh, my father's laugh, rolled through the wet night. Then closer, just outside the range of the right headlight, I saw a movement, a shadow brushing the mist. You will follow. It's not far. I stared into the darkness. I could see just enough to imagine shapes moving, tall, narrow shapes that shifted like they were watching me. And every few seconds, those steps in the water. Closer, then farther, then closer again. The rain kept its steady rhythm against the roof, against the glass, like the ticking of a slow, patient clock. You'll see me again, the voice said softly, almost kindly. Just start the engine. I'll guide you. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the keys in the ignition. Every instinct screamed, don't. But my foot twitched toward the pedal all the same, as if the voice had wrapped invisible strings around it. Something splashed, loud this time, like a boot stomping straight into a deep puddle. My eyes darted toward the sound, but the light never reached it. The voice spoke again, lower now, as if leaning right into my ear. If you don't come, I'll have to wait outside your window. You won't like that. I froze, hearing my own breath hitch. Then, silence. No more steps, no more voice. Just the rain. And yet, every drop felt like it carried a whisper, almost forming words I couldn't quite catch. I stared out through the windshield, knowing without seeing that it was still out there, waiting just beyond the light. The rain grew heavier the moment I twisted the key. The engine roared to life, a low guttural growl under the drumming of water on the cab. My headlights cut through the curtain of rain just enough to paint the first few yards of wet asphalt ahead. I shoved the shifter into gear and eased onto the narrow exit lane of the lot. The tires hissed across the puddles, every turn of the wheel feeling like it had to fight the weight of the night itself. I told myself, don't look back. But I did. In the rearview mirror, through streaks of water on the glass, I saw it. A figure, walking dead center down the blacktop, framed perfectly between the glowing white lines. Head slightly lowered, arms loose at its sides. The shape moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Yet somehow, it was closing the distance with each second, as though the road itself was pulling it toward me. I pressed the accelerator harder. The cab trembled as the truck picked up speed. But when I looked again, it was closer. The face was barely visible through the rain, but I knew it wasn't my father's. Not really. Too long in the jaw, too thin in the cheeks, skin stretched just a bit too tight. But the mouth, it moved exactly in time with his voice. You can't outdrive me, Michael. The words bled into the cab without passing through the air, straight into my ears, my skull. I shifted up and pushed the speed higher, 80, 90. My wipers struggled to keep pace with the downpour, the highway shimmering like black glass under the headlights. But in that mirror, always in the mirror, the figure walked. Not running, not straining, just walking. The road behind shimmered, reflecting those long legs, the pale face growing sharper in every flash of distant lightning. I realized my hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the knowledge that no matter how far the speedometer climbed, the gap never widened. Then the voice changed. It softened, calmer, almost patient. "Don't make me come closer. Just follow me, Michael. I'll take you to him." The mention of him punched through my chest. My father's name burned in my mind. I bit down on the thought, forcing my eyes to the road ahead. But my gaze drifted back to the mirror anyway. The figure was smiling now, not wide, not grotesque, but with the quiet confidence of someone who already knows the ending. Each drop of rain that hit the glass distorted the smile, made it waver and shimmer like heat on asphalt. I slammed the high beams on, flooding the road behind with white light. The mirror went blinding for a moment, and when my eyes adjusted, the road was empty. No figure, just the center line stretching endlessly into the rain. I let out a shaky breath, fingers still welded to the wheel. For the next mile, I didn't dare look back again. Not until I caught, in the farthest edge of my peripheral vision, the faintest pale shape, keeping pace far outside the reach of the lights. And when I blinked, it was gone. But the voice came one last time, low, almost tender, curling up from somewhere in the darkness behind me. "We'll talk again." I kept driving, and the rain kept falling. Story 6. The highway stretched out like an endless ribbon of black glass, the only light coming from the twin beams of the semi's headlights. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the air still clung with a damp chill, and a thin mist curled low over the asphalt. The green reflective sign appeared in the gloom ahead, Mile 327. The letters caught the light and flashed back with a pale, almost sickly glow. As the sign slid past, something in the periphery pulled his eyes from the road. There, on the right shoulder, a figure, a woman. She was standing just beyond the white line, close enough that the wind from the truck would whip her hair when he passed. She wore something light, white, maybe a dress, maybe a long coat. In the gloom, it almost looked like the fabric shimmered. Her arm was raised, hand open, palm forward, waving in a slow, deliberate arc, not frantically, not like someone in danger. More like she knew he'd stop. The driver tightened his grip on the wheel. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, a lone woman at night could mean trouble, or danger for her. The mist clung to her legs. He couldn't see her face. The hood of her garment hung forward, casting it into shadow. And yet, there was the unmistakable sense she was looking directly at him, eyes locked, even as the truck barreled closer. The CB was quiet. No chatter from other drivers, no static. Just the hum of the engine and the low hiss of tires on damp road. She didn't move when the headlights washed over her, didn't take a step back. Her hand kept its slow, hypnotic wave. He passed her in less than a second. But something about that second stretched, felt wrong. The instant she left his peripheral vision, his stomach dropped. The shoulder ahead was empty, and he had the unshakable sense that she wasn't behind him either. The sign for Mile 327 was already swallowed by the mist in his mirrors. But in the cab, the air suddenly felt colder. The green glow of the Mile 327 sign was gone now, swallowed by the fog curling over the road behind him. The hum of the engine was steady, almost comforting, but his eyes kept darting to the side mirror. It was just habit. Checking the lane, checking for headlights. But this time, something caught his breath in his throat. She was there. In the mirror, framed in the shimmering rectangle of Silver Road, the woman in white was walking toward him. Not along the shoulder, not in the gravel. Right down the center of the lane he had just driven through. Step after step, her head was slightly lowered, but somehow, impossibly, he felt her eyes still locked on his. The hood still shadowed her face. Her hands swung gently at her sides now, as if she'd never waved at all. The strange thing, the thing that made his knuckles go white on the steering wheel, was the road itself. Empty, black. No other cars, no headlights, no tail lights, nothing but the glowing lines in the asphalt. She was the only thing moving, and she was moving toward him. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The big diesel roared, the scenery sliding past faster. But in the mirror, her pace didn't change. He couldn't even tell if she was getting smaller. It was like the road behind him was bending, keeping her close. The CB crackled suddenly. Just a sharp burst of static, enough to make him flinch. He grabbed the mic. "Breaker, breaker, anyone out here on 327? Silence. He checked the mirror again. She was still walking. And then, she raised her hand again, palm out, the same slow arc of a wave. The hair on his arms stood on end. Something about the motion was wrong. Too smooth, too even, like a looped piece of film. The truck's headlights caught a patch of mist swirling ahead, and for a moment he had to focus on the curve of the road. When he glanced back into the mirror, she was gone. The lane was empty. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, trying to laugh it off, trying to blame fatigue, bad eyes, anything. And then he saw it. A pale shape just at the edge of the highway's reach ahead, walking toward him. The wipers swayed back and forth, slow and hypnotic, clearing the thin sheen of mist from the glass before it could bead into rain. The hum of the tires on asphalt filled the cab, low and steady. He kept both hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked forward. Somewhere deep in the dark, a part of him had convinced itself it was over. Whatever he had seen back there was gone now, swallowed by the night. Maybe it had been a trick of the fog, or the shimmer of road paint in the mirrors. He even reached for his thermos, hoping a gulp of bitter coffee would pull him fully out of the haze in his head. That's when the weight shifted. Not much, just enough to feel the springs in the passenger seat compress. A faint rustle of fabric, the whisper of something brushing the vinyl. His heart slammed against his ribs. Slowly, as if turning his head too fast would make it worse. He glanced to his right. She was sitting there, the same white dress, crumpled softly around her knees, her hands folded in her lap, pale fingers intertwined. Her head was slightly bowed, the dark curtain of her hair hiding most of her face, but not enough to miss the curve of her jaw. And the faint shimmer of water droplets on her cheek, catching the dim glow from the dashboard. She didn't look at him, didn't move, just stared straight ahead through the windshield as the highway unrolled into the dark. His mouth went dry. How the hell? He stopped himself. The words felt like they would break whatever fragile, awful thread was holding this moment together. He reached for the CB mic, but the line was already hissing with low static. No voices, no chatter. She breathed once, slow, audible, as if the sound of it was meant for him. The cab smelled faintly of wet earth, like rain-soaked grass and mud. They passed under a solitary overhead sign, its green surface lit briefly by the truck's beams. Mile 327 again. That wasn't possible. He hadn't turned around. Her head tilted slightly toward him then, just enough to make his skin crawl. He couldn't see her eyes, but he felt them. The air in the cab seemed heavier, pressing against his lungs. He looked back at the road, forcing his focus on the center line, counting the dashed markings, anything to anchor himself. And yet, in the corner of his vision, she sat still, unmoving, breathing. The truck rolled off the main stretch of highway, tires crunching over loose gravel as the glow of the rest stop came into view. Sodium yellow lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly in the damp air. He pulled into an empty space near the far edge of the lot, the engine idling low and steady. His eyes darted to the right. She was still there. Same posture, same folded hands, head tilted just enough that her hair masked most of her face. The seatbelt strap cut diagonally across her dress, taut against her chest. He killed the engine. The sudden silence made the cab feel smaller, like the darkness outside had moved closer. For the first time, he turned to face her fully. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low but sharp, the kind of tone he used when he expected trouble. She didn't answer, didn't blink. His skin prickled. He gripped the door handle and shoved it open, stepping down into the cool night air. The ground was wet, and the rain made a soft hiss as it touched the hood of the truck. He walked around the front, his boots splashing through shallow puddles, and yanked open the passenger door. The seat was empty. No dress, no pale hands, no trace of anyone having sat there except... The seatbelt was still fastened, clicked firmly into place. The fabric strap swayed slightly, as if it had just been pulled across a body seconds before. His pulse hammered in his ears. He unlatched it with a sharp snap, half expecting some trick, a bundle of clothes, a mannequin, anything. But the seat was bare, damp only from the lingering condensation in the air. He scanned the lot. Nothing but the hum of the lights and the slow, constant drizzle painting the asphalt black. The rest stop looked abandoned, every window dark. Then, just as he climbed back into the cab, a movement caught his eye, in the side mirror. On the far side of the lot, past the reach of the lights, a figure in white was walking away into the darkness. She didn't look back. The CB crackled suddenly with a burst of static, followed by a single whisper, stretched thin and distant. "Mile. 3. 2. 7. Story 7. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the asphalt at Stop 19 still gleamed under the flicker of sodium lights. It was one of those forgotten truck stops, the kind with a half-broken sign, a diner that never really looked open, and a parking lot that smelled faintly of oil and dust. I'd been driving since sundown, my eyes gritty from staring at the endless strip of highway, and figured I'd pull in for coffee, maybe a slice of pie if the cook was still around. I rolled the rig into the far end of the lot, past a row of silent trucks sitting nose to nose like sleeping beasts. Most of them were dark, their cabs sealed, curtains drawn. But one was different. A soft yellow glow spilled from the windshield of an older Peterbilt, the kind you don't see much anymore except in old trucker magazines. Its dome light was on, bright and steady, like someone had just opened the door a second ago. I slowed as I passed, glancing inside out of habit. The cab was empty. Driver's seat, passenger's seat, sleeper, all vacant. No sign of movement, no shadow. No figure reaching for a cup of coffee or flipping through a logbook. Just that stubborn light, burning away like it didn't care that no one was home. I parked 2 rows over, but my eyes kept drifting back to it. The glow was strange, not harsh, not the cold glare you get from newer LEDs. It was warm, almost like candlelight, and for some reason, it made the empty cab feel occupied. Like the second I looked away, someone would slide into the driver's seat and stare back at me. The diner's neon open sign buzzed weakly in the distance, but I didn't move toward it. Instead, I sat there with the engine idling low, windshield wipers squeaking every few seconds to clear the mist. My CB was quiet. The lot was quiet. Out here, that kind of stillness isn't comforting. It presses in, fills the spaces where noise should be. I told myself it wasn't my business. Probably just some guy inside grabbing a coffee who forgot to turn his light off. Maybe he was on the phone, sitting at a booth, not realizing every bug in the county was smacking against his windshield right now. But there was something else, something that made me keep watching. I could have sworn, just as I turned the key to kill the engine, the light inside the cab flickered. Not like a bulb going bad, but like movement. And that's when I noticed the detail that froze me in place. The truck's number, stenciled on the side of the cab in faded black paint, matched one I'd seen years ago. A truck from a story I'd heard whispered at another stop, 100 miles east. A story that didn't end well. I shook it off, telling myself it was just coincidence. Numbers get reused. Paint gets copied. But still, I stayed in my seat, staring through the thin mist at that empty, glowing cab. And the longer I looked, the more certain I became. Someone was in there. I stayed in my seat longer than I meant to, the hum of the engine settling into a low, almost hypnotic rhythm. Every so often, my eyes would drift from the rain-speckled windshield back to the Peterbilt across the lot. The light inside had been steady before, but now it was different. It blinked out, just for a moment, not long enough to be a dying bulb, not in that smooth, fading way electronics fail. This was abrupt. The cab went completely dark, as though someone had reached up and flipped the switch. Then, almost immediately, the glow was back again, spilling across the dashboard, glinting off chrome. I leaned forward, peering through the mist, my hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. The next time it happened, I caught it. A quick, sharp interruption of light, like something had passed between the bulb and the windshield. A shadow? Not a random shape from the outside. No. This one moved from inside. I sat up straight, every muscle suddenly on alert. The rain pattered on the roof of my cab, the sound louder now, or maybe I was just listening harder. I turned the key to cut the engine, letting the wipers stop mid-swipe. Without the rumble of the motor, the silence was heavy, except for the occasional hiss of tires on wet pavement somewhere far off on the highway. I stared, unblinking, and there it was again. The light cut out, not a flicker this time, but a steady blackout, lasting maybe 3 seconds. My eyes adjusted to the sudden dark, but before I could catch any detail, the warm yellow glow returned, steady as if nothing had happened. I told myself I could walk over, just get out, cross the slick asphalt, and look inside. Nothing scary about that. But the truth was, I didn't move. Something about that cab, about the way the light seemed to obey a rhythm I couldn't quite place, kept me in my seat. It went dark again. This time, When the glow came back, I thought I saw movement behind the glass. Just the faintest impression of a figure leaning forward, then pulling back, the way you might shift in a chair if you were deciding whether to stand. The heat kicked on in my cab, the vents breathing warm air onto the windshield. But a chill still crawled across my arms. I glanced at the diner. The neon open was still lit, buzzing faintly, and through its smudged windows I could see no one, no cook, no waitress, no customers. Just empty booths and the shadow of a ceiling fan turning slow. My gaze went back to the Peterbilt. The rain made the light look soft now, hazy, but it didn't hide the fact that the shadow was still there, standing still right in front of the glass. I tried the CB, clicking it on, but all I got was static, low, constant, like a held breath. No chatter from other drivers, no music from distant stations, just the hiss. The shadow shifted again. Not much. Just enough to let me know it was aware of me. And in that strange, soundless moment, I realized something that made my fingers curl tight around the steering wheel. The light was only going out when I blinked. It wasn't random at all. It was waiting. I told myself the same thing over and over. It's probably nothing. Just a trick of the rain, maybe a faulty light, a reflection in the glass. But even as I said it in my head, my hand was already reaching for the door handle. The air outside hit me like a wet slap. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain, each drop cold enough to bite through my jacket. My boots splashed in shallow puddles as I stepped down from my cab. The world felt muted out here. No distant engines, no clinking of cutlery from the diner, just rain and my own footsteps on wet asphalt. The Peterbilt sat about 30 yards away. From here, I could see the pale yellow glow in its cab, spilling across the windshield like the warmth from a lamp left on for someone who isn't coming home. Halfway there, the light blinked out again. I stopped. The rain pattered against my hood, sliding down the back of my neck in icy rivulets. My eyes searched the glass, waiting for some movement, some shape. But nothing. And then the light was back. I kept walking. My footsteps sounded loud now. Too loud. And the parking lot seemed larger than it should have been, the distance between me and that truck stretching out like a bad dream. When I finally reached the Peterbilt, I stood at the passenger side, close enough to touch the door. The paint was slick under my palm, cold as metal pulled from a freezer. I cupped my hands around my eyes and peered in. Nothing. The driver's seat was empty, the passenger seat too. No duffel bags, no logbooks, no coffee cups left in cup holders. Just bare upholstery, neat and clean, like the truck had rolled straight off a showroom floor. I hesitated, then tried the handle. It clicked open. That stopped me cold. No driver leaves his cab unlocked in a place like this. I climbed up slowly, one foot on the step, one hand gripping the frame of the open door. The smell hit me first. Sharp, metallic, and electric, like the air after a lightning strike. Ozone. It was strong enough to sting my nose. Inside, everything was wrong. The dashboard lights glowed faintly, but the keys weren't in the ignition. The floor was spotless, the seats without a single wrinkle. And yet, I could feel it. The air was heavy, pressing against my skin the way it feels right before a summer storm. I leaned further in, listening. Nothing but the rain on the roof. I ran my hand over the steering wheel, dry, despite the truck's open door. My fingertips tingled when I touched it, like a static charge was building up in my skin. I pulled back fast, wiping my hand on my jeans. The light overhead flickered, once, twice, then stayed on. I sat there on the step for a long moment, staring into the empty space, feeling like I'd interrupted something I couldn't see. The smell of ozone was still strong, almost overpowering now, and I realized it wasn't fading with the open door. If anything, it was getting stronger. That was when I heard it. A single deliberate click from somewhere deep in the cab, like a latch being set. I was still leaning in when every hair on my arm stood on end. I stepped down from the stranger's cab, the ozone still sharp in my nose, and closed the door behind me. The rain had eased, but the air felt heavier now, like the whole truck stop was holding its breath. My own rig sat in the same place I'd left it, a dark shape in the dim light of the lot, familiar, solid. I started toward it, boots slapping against the wet pavement. The hum of the highway beyond the rest stop was faint, distant. Halfway back, I caught it in the corner of my eye. A glow. I stopped, water dripping from the brim of my cap. Slowly, I turned my head toward my truck. The cab's interior was lit. Warm, bright, wrong. I knew I'd switched it off. I remembered the click of the switch, the soft fade of the dashboard lights. For a long second, I just stood there in the rain, staring. My mind started running through excuses. Maybe I'd left it on without realizing. Maybe there was a short in the wiring. But each one felt thin, transparent. The glow wasn't steady. It pulsed just slightly, like the light itself was breathing. I took a step forward, then another. My boots splashed through shallow puddles. The closer I got, the stronger that smell became again. Ozone, metallic and sharp, crawling into my lungs. When I reached the door, I paused, my hand on the handle. My own reflection stared back at me in the glass. Rain on my face, eyes wide, breath visible in the cold air. But there was something else in that reflection. Behind me. A shape, faint and blurred, as if standing just over my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. Just the dark lot and the silver outline of the Peterbilt I'd just left. My heart was hammering. I looked back at the glass and froze. The shape in the reflection was still there. This time, it was sitting in the driver's seat. My seat. Head bowed, shoulders hunched, its outline barely lit by the warm interior light. I yanked the door open, empty. No smell of my usual coffee, no fast food wrappers, no faint trace of diesel from my jacket. Just that same electric tang, stronger now, prickling against the back of my tongue. The light above the dash flickered once, twice, then went out. I stood there, holding the open door, the rain pattering softly on the roof. I don't know how long I waited before climbing in, but I didn't look in the mirrors again. Not until I was halfway down the on-ramp back to the interstate. And when I did, just for a moment, in the driver's side mirror, I saw the light in my cab flicker back on. Story 8. The highway stretched out before him like a ribbon of black glass, perfectly straight, disappearing into a horizon that never seemed to get any closer. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m., but the air inside the cab felt timeless. Thick with the hum of the engine, the faint hiss of the tires against the asphalt, and the steady pulse of the yellow lane markers flashing in the corner of his vision. Out here, in this part of the desert, there were no towns for at least 100 miles in either direction. No gas stations, no motels, just road. The CB had been silent for almost an hour. That in itself was strange. Even in the loneliest stretches, there was usually a stray voice, someone calling out for a way station update or a driver telling a joke to keep himself awake. Tonight, nothing. The silence was heavy, almost intentional, as if the airwaves had been cleared for him alone. Up ahead, in the beam of his headlights, a shape began to materialize. First, just a faint glint of metal, then the unmistakable outline of a semi-truck pulled off onto the shoulder. Hazard lights blinked, two orange beacons punching rhythmically through the dark. As he drew closer, he could make out the faded white paint on the trailer, streaked with grime, and the way the cab sat at a slightly crooked angle, like its front axle had collapsed on one side. He slowed as he passed, eyes scanning for a driver. The cab light was on, but no silhouette moved inside. The window on the passenger side was down a crack, and a curtain inside shifted faintly, as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. For a moment, the impulse to pull over tugged at him. Another driver stranded out here would be grateful for company, maybe for a jump, maybe just for a ride to the next stop. But something in the stillness of that truck, something about the way the blinking hazard lights felt too slow, almost out of sync, made his fingers tighten on the wheel and his foot press back on the accelerator. He told himself it wasn't fear, just caution. You didn't stop in the middle of nowhere at night unless you had to. The hazard lights faded into the distance behind him, swallowed by darkness. The road ahead was empty again, stretching endlessly forward. He adjusted in his seat, took a sip from the thermos of coffee on the console, and let the hum of the tires steady his nerves. The clock ticked from 2:17 to 2:18. And then, there it was again. Up ahead, in the beam of his headlights, the same shape materialized. First, a glint of metal, then the white trailer, the grime streaks, the slightly crooked cab. Hazard lights blinking, exactly the same rhythm, exactly the same angle. He blinked hard, sat up straighter. It couldn't be the same truck. He'd been driving a good 15 minutes since passing it. Maybe this stretch had more than one broken down rig. Maybe it was a coincidence. But the trailer number, he could see it now, was the same. The curtain in the passenger window shifted again, just like before. His fingers tightened on the wheel. This time, as he passed, he caught something else, just for a second, in the corner of his eye. A shape in the driver's seat, leaning forward toward the windshield. Not moving, not waving, just watching. By the time he glanced in the side mirror, the cab light was still on, but the seat looked empty again. The clock still read 2:18. The road had not changed in an hour. The same black strip stretched under his wheels, the same faded yellow lines, the same pale glow of distant stars, barely visible between thick strips of cloud. The dashboard clock read 3:18 a.m., though he could have sworn it had been 2:18 just a few minutes ago. His eyes felt gritty, his knuckles stiff around the steering wheel, and the coffee in the thermos was now lukewarm. He had tried to shake the unease after passing that broken-down rig the second time. Told himself it was just fatigue, that he was mixing up the details. Highways were full of white trailers with streaks of grime. But the truth kept creeping back into his mind. He remembered the number on the trailer, the pattern of dirt like water stains running down the side. Even the bent license plate on the rear bumper, too exact to be chance. The CB was still dead silent, not even static now, just an empty hiss, like someone had turned the volume all the way down on the world outside. He kept glancing at the dial, wondering if maybe it was broken. But no, the frequency readout was fine. The hum of the tires had become hypnotic when a familiar pulse of orange broke the dark ahead. Hazard lights. He leaned forward in his seat, squinting. The truck on the shoulder looked exactly the same as before. Same angle of tilt, same slow blink of the lights. Still that off-kilter rhythm that made it feel unnatural, like a heartbeat out of time. The cab light glowed faintly. The curtain in the passenger window shifted. His chest tightened. He had driven nearly 60 miles since the last time. There was no turnoff, no loop, no road that could have brought him back here without him noticing. And yet, here it was. He slowed as he approached. His headlights swept over the white trailer, picking up every grimy detail he already knew by heart. The number on the side, identical. The streak on the rear door that looked like a handprint dragged downward, identical. As he passed, he turned his head just slightly, just enough to see the driver's seat. This time there was no doubt. Someone was sitting there. A man, broad-shouldered, leaning forward, face obscured by shadow. But the posture was deliberate, like he'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for him. They locked eyes for the briefest instant, though the cab's interior was too dark to truly see any eyes at all. And then the figure's head tilted, ever so slightly, as though acknowledging him. He jerked his gaze back to the road, forcing the truck's speed back up, the diesel engine roaring as he pulled away. His heart was pounding, hands slick on the wheel. He watched the hazard lights fade in the mirror. They seemed to linger longer than they should have, blinking slow, 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 until the road behind went black again. The clock read 3:18 a.m., and then, just as before, the road kept going, perfectly straight, the desert stretching endlessly in both directions. No towns, no junctions, no sign of the world shifting at all. Until, far ahead, a faint orange blink began to pierce the dark once more. The clock still read 3:18 a.m. He'd been glancing at it for what felt like another full hour, waiting for the numbers to change, waiting for some sign that the night was moving forward. But every time his eyes returned to the dashboard, it was the same. Those 3 glowing digits, locked in time, as if the truck's electrical system itself had frozen. The road beneath him stayed perfectly straight, without a single curve to break the monotony. The hum of the tires had begun to sound mechanical, almost artificial, like a looped recording. He switched on the radio, more for company than anything else. A burst of static, sharp enough to make him flinch, cracked in the speakers. Then a voice, soft and blurred, like it was coming from somewhere very far away. Mile marker 327. He froze. That was the same phrase that had played when he first passed the broken-down truck earlier. Same inflection, same tone. The voice on the radio faded into faint music, something slow and old, maybe from the 60s. But even the melody seemed familiar. He couldn't place it, but the notes carried the weight of déjà vu, pressing at the edges of his mind. Another whisper cut through the song, so soft he almost missed it. You haven't left yet. His hands tightened on the wheel. The whisper came again, a fraction louder. You haven't left yet. It was not a question. It was a statement. And it carried something cold, almost amused, beneath the words. He tried to tell himself it was just interference, some trucker's CB bleeding into the FM signal. But the way it synced with the moment, how it fit, made the hairs rise on his arms. He reached for the radio knob, but before he could touch it, the song began from the beginning again. The same static burst, the same weathered announcer's voice reading the same highway advisory, the same 3 seconds of silence. And then, that whisper, perfectly timed. "You haven't left yet." He swallowed hard, a dry click in his throat. The sky ahead was still empty, no hint of dawn. His headlights cut a cone of light into the darkness, catching nothing but the endless asphalt and the shimmering mirage of heat off the road, even though it was the middle of the night and cold enough to mist his breath. In the distance, a dim orange pulse blinked once. His stomach dropped. Hazard lights. Again. "No," he muttered aloud. His own voice sounded small in the cab. But as he drew closer, the scene played out exactly as before. The broken down truck on the shoulder, the slow, uneven flash, the faint glow from the cab. He knew, without even looking, that if he glanced into the driver's seat, the man would be there again, waiting. He gripped the wheel and kept his eyes locked forward, passed without slowing. In the mirror, the hazard lights winked in the dark, in time with the whisper that came through the radio one last time. "You haven't left yet." The clock still read 3:18 a.m., and the hum of the tires kept looping, steady, hypnotic, leading him right back where he had started. He didn't remember deciding to turn. His hands just wrenched the wheel to the right, the front tires jolting over the rumble strip as the truck lurched toward the narrow dirt road branching off the highway. The beam of his headlights cut into total blackness. No reflective paint, no road markers, just raw, uneven earth vanishing under the truck's nose. The air outside seemed thicker here, swallowing sound. Even the hum of the tires on gravel felt muted, smothered. He pressed harder on the accelerator, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed to put distance between himself and that endless stretch of highway. The radio had gone dead the moment his wheels left the asphalt. No static, no music, just an empty silence that pressed in on his ears. The trees, had there been trees before, rose up on either side, their trunks pale in the beams before vanishing overhead. The branches seemed to bend inward, narrowing the road, closing behind him as he passed. He didn't look in the mirrors. Not yet. He told himself that whatever was back there, whoever, couldn't follow him off the highway. The dirt road twisted sharply, then flattened into a long, straight path that seemed to dissolve into a horizonless dark. His headlights illuminated only 20, maybe 30 feet ahead, before the black swallowed it whole. No signs of houses, no utility poles, not even the faint red pinpricks of distant taillights. His hands hurt. He realized he'd been gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Breathe. Just breathe. Keep going. Something in the corner of his vision flickered. A pale, rhythmic flash. He refused to look, kept his eyes locked ahead. But the flash came again. Closer. His pulse thundered in his ears. Slowly, unwillingly, his gaze shifted to the driver's side mirror. His stomach turned to ice. The highway was there. Not the dirt road he'd turned onto, but the same black ribbon of asphalt, stretching into the void. The reflective green Mile 327 sign glinted faintly in the darkness. And there, just over his left shoulder in the mirror, was the same broken down truck, hazard lights blinking their slow, taunting rhythm. It wasn't behind him. It wasn't to the side. It was instead of the road he'd been driving. He blinked, and the mirror's image didn't change. The dirt road outside the windshield and the highway in the mirror existed at the same time, as if he were caught between both. The hazard lights blinked again. The whisper was so close, it could have been right in his ear. "You haven't left yet." His throat closed. He gripped the wheel until his hands ached, pressing the accelerator to the floor. The truck roared into the dark, but the mirror never lost that image. The highway, the mile marker, and the broken-down rig with its steady pulse of orange light. Each blink pulling him back, no matter how far he drove. Story 9. The highway was nothing but black ribbon, unraveling in front of him into a void without edges. His headlights carved out a tunnel in the night, picking up scraps of road paint and the reflective glare of the occasional mile marker. Everything else, sky, desert, horizon, was swallowed in an endless shade of charcoal. Then he saw it. At first, it looked like a trick of his eyes, a faint, steady glow far ahead, stretched perfectly horizontal across the horizon. Not a town, not a sunrise. It was too clean, too precise, like someone had taken a ruler to the darkness and drawn a razor-sharp seam of pale light between the earth and the sky. He leaned forward over the wheel, squinting. The glow didn't flicker, didn't pulse. It just hung there, unbothered by the wind or the slight curve of the road. And moving toward it, maybe a mile ahead, was another truck, its taillights small red pinpricks in the vastness. Whoever was driving it was heading straight for that impossible line. He checked his dashboard clock. 2:13 a.m. No other cars in sight. No sound but the steady hum of the engine and the low hiss of tires against asphalt. As he closed the distance, the details sharpened. The light wasn't spilling up into the sky or down onto the ground. It was contained, a perfect slit of brightness, like the edge of a door cracked open in the dark. And it was big, much bigger than he'd realized. It stretched left to right beyond his field of vision, endless in both directions. His eyes flicked back to the other truck. It didn't slow down. He tried to gauge the distance, a few hundred yards, maybe less. The glow was growing, reflecting faintly off the chrome edges of the trailer ahead. The blacktop itself seemed to fade into white the closer it got to that seam, as though the road itself was being pulled into it. The air changed. He didn't hear it at first. He felt it. A subtle pressure in his ears, like when driving into higher altitude. The hum of his tires deepened, as if the pavement had thickened beneath them. He gripped the wheel tighter. The other truck's brake lights didn't flash. Not once. He thought about reaching for the CB, but his fingers hovered and stopped. His gut told him this was the sort of thing you didn't interrupt, the sort of thing that might notice if you called out to it. The light was brighter now, sharp enough that the edges of the silhouette ahead began to dissolve into its glow. The truck wasn't being lit up. It was being erased by it. His pulse hammered. The slit of light didn't spread or fade. It remained the same narrow, infinite band. Yet the truck ahead seemed to be swallowed whole in the space of a breath. One moment its taillights burned against the dark. The next, they were gone. No sound. No explosion. No dust. Just gone. And the line of light remained, silent and perfect, waiting. He found himself easing off the accelerator without thinking, the steering wheel heavy in his hands. His headlights reached toward that glow now, catching strange pale motes in the air, like dust caught in sunlight. But the dust didn't drift or swirl. It hung still, suspended. Something in his chest twisted. The light wasn't a horizon. It wasn't a sunrise. It was an ending. And he was still heading straight for it. He had been watching the other truck for the last half mile, eyes locked on those red taillights. They were steady, unwavering, small points of normalcy against the impossible white seam that split the world ahead. And then they reached it. The glow didn't brighten or burst. There was no flare, no blinding flash. The other truck simply touched the light and began to dissolve. Not vanish all at once. No, it peeled away in layers, like mist burning off under morning sun. First went the rear of the trailer, the chrome bumper disappearing into nothing. The red lights bled into the glow and faded. The body followed, becoming translucent, edges blurring until it was impossible to tell where the metal ended and the light began. For a moment, the cab hung there, perfectly framed in the slit of brightness, like a photograph held up to the sky. And then, piece by piece, it thinned out, color and form draining into pure white. The glow swallowed it, quietly, completely. He braked without realizing it. His own truck shuddered as the speed bled off. The engine's steady rumble sounded too loud in the silence that followed. There was nothing in front of him now except the light. The slit stretched across the horizon, cutting reality in half. On his side, darkness, road, the familiar hum of tires on asphalt. Beyond it, nothing. Not night, not day. Just a brightness that had no texture, no depth. It wasn't like looking at a sun or a lamp. It was like staring into an absence that had decided to glow. He eased forward a few more yards. The air grew heavier, pressing on his ears, his chest. The dust in the beam of his headlights froze in midair, motionless. The radio hissed with static, faint but constant, as though the sound had been there all along, hiding under the engine noise. And then, under the static, a sound, low, almost imperceptible, a hum. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't wind, it was too steady, too deep, vibrating in the bones of his skull. He gripped the wheel hard enough for his knuckles to ache. Up close, the seam of light wasn't razor thin after all. There was depth to it, but not in any way his brain could map. His eyes wanted to slide off it, to pretend there was still a horizon there. The glow bent slightly at the edges, almost like a curtain pulled taut. The truck ahead hadn't driven into the light. It had been taken. He could feel the pull now, subtle but undeniable. The sensation was like the road was gently tilting toward that slit, gravity bending toward it. His right foot pressed down on the brake. The tires gripped, resisting the slope that wasn't there. For a brief, stupid moment, he thought about turning around, just swinging the wheel, flooring it in the other direction, leaving this road forever. But the glow was reflected in the chrome of his mirrors. Even when he glanced away, it painted the corners of his vision, a ghostly afterimage. Something about the way the light shimmered made it feel aware. Not just there, watching. The hum deepened. A gust of wind blew across the highway, warm and dry, smelling faintly of ozone. It swept past the truck, but the dust it carried didn't settle. It hung in place, trembling faintly, as though caught in invisible threads. The glow didn't change. It didn't move. It simply waited. He swallowed hard, his mouth dry. The truck ahead was gone. Not crashed, not broken down. Gone. And now he realized the road carried only one vehicle toward the light. His. The hum was still there. crawling along the inside of his skull. He reached for the radio without thinking, fingers brushing the worn plastic dial. The static swelled for a moment, then thinned, as if retreating just enough to make space for something else. A voice. It was male, low, calm. Too calm. There was no background noise, no hiss of an open line, no faint echoes of a studio or road. Just that voice, clear and deliberate. "Now it's your turn." He froze, hand still on the radio. The wheel felt slick under his palm, though he couldn't remember sweating. "Who is this?" he asked aloud, his voice sounding small in the cab. The radio didn't answer. "Your turn," the voice repeated, exactly the same tone and timing, as if it had been recorded and was simply playing again. The air in the cab felt wrong, warmer than before, heavy, thick. His headlights cut through the dark, but ahead, the glow stretched from one edge of the world to the other. No matter how far he drove, he couldn't see anything beyond it. His mind went to the other truck, the way it had been eaten alive by the light, erased without a sound. He pictured the driver's hands on the wheel, maybe realizing too late that there was no brake strong enough to stop the pull. The voice returned, softer now, but closer, like someone leaning in from the passenger seat. "Don't stop now." He glanced to his right. The seat was empty, just cracked vinyl and the faint outline of rain spots drying on the window. When he looked back at the road, the glow seemed nearer. Not brighter, just closer. He glanced at the speedometer. 50. He could drop to 40, maybe 30. Maybe stop altogether. The thought brought a flicker of relief, until he realized the hum was sinking with the engine's idle, vibrating through the pedals, through the floor, into his legs. It wasn't just in the radio anymore. It was everywhere. The road was narrowing, though he hadn't noticed until now. The shoulders had disappeared, leaving nothing but asphalt and the endless black on either side. No fences, no signs, no mile markers. Only the faint white paint flashing beneath the truck in steady rhythm. Another whisper from the radio, barely audible over the engine. No other way forward? He turned the dial sharply, but the voice clung to the speakers. Every station was the same. Static, then, that calm, measured tone. "Your turn." He tried to remember the last time he had turned off this highway, the last time he had seen another car. The glow was so close now he could make out subtle waves in it, like heat over asphalt. Sometimes the ripples hinted at shapes, curves that might have been roads, silhouettes that might have been trucks. The voice spoke again, this time in a slow, deliberate rhythm, like a clock ticking. One way, one way, one way. His foot eased off the gas, but the truck didn't slow. The engine kept pulling, steady, as if something ahead had taken control of the throttle. He gripped the wheel tighter. If he swerved, hard left, hard right, would the tires even grip the asphalt? Or would he just slide toward that slit of white like the whole world was tilting? The hum was inside his bones now, making his teeth ache. He wanted to turn around. God, he wanted to turn around, wanted to. But the mirrors showed only darkness behind him. No stars, no road, no headlights. Just black, as if the light was the only place left. The voice returned, quiet but absolute. "It's waiting." The glow pulsed once, subtle, almost imperceptible, and he realized it was no longer a question of stopping. There was no road to turn back to, only one path left, forward. The glow filled the horizon now. It wasn't a point of light anymore, or even a band. It was a wall, smooth, featureless, stretching from one edge of the windshield to the other. It swallowed the road whole, leaving no shadows, no texture, no sense of distance. The voice on the radio was silent at last. Only the hum remained. He eased his foot toward the brake. For a moment, the truck resisted, as though some unseen weight pushed it forward. Then the speedometer needle began to drop. 50, 45, 40. The highway's shoulders reappeared faintly in the headlights, thin strips of gravel edging into darkness. If he turned now, hard and fast, he might just manage to slide off the asphalt and vanish into the black fields on either side. No light there, no road, nothing. His hands tightened on the wheel. The glow ahead seemed alive somehow, adjusting to his hesitation. It didn't pulse or flicker, but it felt as if it were leaning in, bending toward him, curious. Raindrops hit the windshield, though the sky above was a perfect void. They slid down in slow, meandering paths, catching the reflection of the light, so each drop became a tiny burning bead. 35. 30. He could feel the steering wheel wanting to straighten whenever he angled it slightly toward the shoulder, as though the front tires preferred the center of the road. His mind raced. If he stayed on the highway, the glow would take him, just like the other truck. If he left it, he'd be alone in that black nothing. And somewhere, deep in that nothing, he thought he saw movement. Shadows shifting just past the limit of the headlights. No shapes, no faces, just motion, slow and deliberate, keeping pace with the truck. The hum was in the pedals now, in the wheel, in his chest. 25. The edge of the glow was impossibly sharp. Where the light ended, there was only void. No stars, no earth, just a flat, infinite black. His father's voice, unbidden, rose in memory. Not from the radio this time, not from outside, from inside his head. Don't let them decide for you. His hands twitched. The wheels swayed. 20. The black fields whispered. Maybe wind. Maybe something else. 15. If he turned now, he might have one chance. Just one. But the glow was so close that the air in the cab had taken on a pale hue, washing the world in colorless light. His skin looked wrong in it, flat, shadowless. 10. The engine purred without effort. The glow no longer seemed far away. It seemed right there, pressed against the windshield, waiting. He glanced at the mirror. No highway behind, no broken-down truck, no night sky, just black. The hum deepened, low and resonant, vibrating in the space between his ribs. 8. 7. The steering wheel sat perfectly centered under his hands. His arms ached from the tension, every muscle in his forearms clenched against the pull forward. 6. The glow was inside now, not just outside the windshield, but in the dash lights, in the mirrors, in the glass of the gauges. It poured across the seats like a flood, with no source. 5. His foot hovered over the brake. 4. His other hand began to turn the wheel, left or right. He hadn't decided which. 3. Light filled the cab, bleaching the upholstery, erasing the color from his skin. His reflection in the side glass was nothing but a pale outline. 2. The hum became silence. 1. He made his choice. The world turned white. Story 10. The desert highway stretched out like a black ribbon under the starless night sky, its faded lane markings flashing rhythmically beneath the truck's headlights. The air was dry, the kind of crisp night wind that whistled around the edges of the cab. He'd been driving for hours without seeing another soul. No oncoming lights, no tail lights ahead. Just the hum of the tires and the deep, mechanical roar of the diesel engine. He shifted up, pushing the truck harder. The speedometer needle edged toward the far end, and the vibration in the steering wheel grew more pronounced. He wasn't the kind of man to drive recklessly, but there was something about the emptiness ahead that begged him to test the limits. Out here, there were no cops, no traffic, no rules, just the night and the road. The engine thundered louder, filling the cabin with a steady, resonant growl. That was when he first noticed it, faint, almost drowned out by the mechanical noise. But there, a whisper. At first, he thought it was the wind sneaking through a crack in the window seal, making that low, fluttering sound. But this was different. The tone was too controlled, too deliberate. He eased off the accelerator, and instantly, it vanished. Frowning, he pressed the pedal down again, bringing the truck back up to full speed. There it was, a breathy murmur, threading through the engine's roar, like someone leaning in close and speaking just below hearing level. He gripped the wheel tighter, eyes darting to the side mirrors. The empty highway stared back. The whisper seemed to have a cadence, almost like words. But each time he strained to focus, the meaning slipped away. "Must be the turbo," he muttered under his breath, though he knew his rig never sounded like this before. His palms were slick on the steering wheel now. For miles, he kept accelerating and easing off, testing it. Every time the truck pushed past a certain speed, the whisper returned, steady, deliberate, unchanging. It was too clear to be random noise, and though he couldn't make out exact syllables, he began to feel a strange certainty that the voice wasn't speaking at him. It was speaking to him. His skin prickled under his shirt. He reached for the CB radio mic and pressed the button. "Breaker, breaker. Anyone got their ears on? I'm running eastbound on 62. Got some weird..." The words caught in his throat, because in the dead air between his own breath and the static of the radio, the whisper seemed to grow louder, as though it had slipped from the engine into the very air of the cab. He shut the mic off. The sound dipped again, retreating back under the mechanical rumble. The road signs flew by in the darkness. His mind worked in circles. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe a trick of the brain after too many hours behind the wheel. But a quieter part of him, the part that still remembered campfire stories and his father's warnings about things on the road, told him this was something else entirely. The whisper was patient. It didn't push. It simply stayed, riding alongside him in the vibrations of the machine, waiting for him to keep the speed high enough for it to speak. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he kept pressing the pedal down, wanting to hear it more clearly. The needle trembled just below the red line, the engine straining but holding, a constant mechanical scream under his feet. That was when the whisper finally stopped hiding. It wasn't just noise now. It was speech. Clear, deliberate. "Daniel." He froze. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. The sound didn't come from the CB. It didn't come from outside. It was inside the engine's roar, as if the pistons themselves were forcing the words out with every cycle. "Daniel," it said again, smoother this time. There was no echo, no reverb, just a voice pressed flat and close, like someone speaking with their lips against his ear. The rational part of his brain kicked in, telling him it was fatigue or some freak resonance in the engine block. But another part, the one that felt his name in the back of his spine, whispered something different. "It knows you." He swallowed, eyes locked on the endless stretch of road ahead. "What do you want?" he said under his breath. The reply was instant. "Turn, 2 miles, left." He blinked. What? 2 miles. Left. The words were calm, as though they were telling him something as ordinary as the weather. His eyes flicked to the GPS mounted on the dash. There was nothing on the map for miles. Just the highway and the endless desert on both sides. No exits, no service roads, no reason to turn. But the voice continued, low and even. Left. Gravel road. You must not miss it. He shook his head hard, like trying to clear water from his ears. Not happening, he muttered. The whisper didn't argue. It simply repeated, left, 2 miles. A green reflector post slid past on his right. Mile marker, 1:44. His stomach tightened. He didn't want to believe it, but the timing was too precise. If there was something up ahead, he'd see it in less than a minute. He thought about slowing down, letting the whisper vanish back into the rumble of the diesel. But some stubborn part of him needed to see if it was right. A faint shape appeared ahead on the left. A break in the guardrail, just wide enough for a vehicle. No lights, no sign, just the dull glint of gravel catching his high beams. As the gap drew closer, the whisper's tone changed, lower, more urgent, like a warning. Now. He gripped the wheel tighter. The road ahead stretched on into the dark like it always had. The gap to the left seemed to breathe in his peripheral vision, waiting. Now, the voice repeated, softer but sharper, like a blade pressed to the skin. His foot hovered over the brake, and for a second, he imagined what it would feel like to turn. The jolt of the tires hitting gravel, the sudden shift of darkness around him. The wheel twitched under his hands. He realized only then that he had unconsciously started to angle left. He cursed under his breath and forced the truck back into line, the gravel road sliding out of view into the dark. The whisper didn't protest. It only faded, retreating back into the engine's rhythm, as if waiting for the next chance. But Daniel knew one thing for sure now. It wasn't just sound. It was something, and it had a destination in mind. The highway blurred beneath him, yellow lines flashing past in a hypnotic rhythm. The tack needle hovered high again, the deep growl of the diesel filling the cab. And with the speed, the whisper came back. Not tentative this time, confident, as though it knew he'd listen. Faster. He didn't even question where it came from anymore. His foot sank into the accelerator, the cab shuddering as the big rig surged forward. The voice swelled with the RPMs, each word woven seamlessly into the mechanical thunder. Left turn, 27 miles. His pulse quickened. There was no GPS marker for such a turn, no sign he could see on the horizon, just that flat, dark desert stretching forever. Why? He muttered. The answer was immediate. You will see. The speedometer crept higher. The faster he went, the sharper the voice became, as if the sound waves themselves were carving it out of the air. He could hear texture in it now, a faint rasp, like breath passing over cracked lips. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence. 20 miles. The night outside deepened, the stars gone. Clouds like smudges against a pitch sky. He realized his headlights barely seemed to push the darkness back. The asphalt ahead was a tunnel of pale light, everything else swallowed by a black so complete it felt liquid. Stay right. There will be debris. He obeyed without thinking, and seconds later, the beam caught shattered glass and the twisted shell of a hubcap glinting on the shoulder. You're guiding me, he said. Yes. The simple confirmation chilled him more than denial would have. 15 miles. The hum of the tires and the roar of the engine had become an orchestra for the voice. Every vibration, a syllable. Every rise and fall of pitch, a command. "Faster," it urged again, and his muscles tensed. He wasn't sure if the demand was for urgency or simply pleasure. 10 miles. He could feel sweat on his neck despite the cool air blasting from the vents. His eyes kept flicking to the mirrors. Empty highway, no headlights in sight. He was alone out here. Alone with it. "Lights ahead," the whisper warned. He scanned the horizon and saw nothing. But as the miles fell away, 2 faint pinpricks appeared. Not the warm amber of street lamps, not the steady glare of other trucks. These were white, sharp, and perfectly still. "Do not slow," it said. 5 miles. The lights grew, still unnervingly motionless, hovering just above the ground. The faster he drove, the closer they came, but they never seemed to drift toward him. It was like the road was collapsing under his wheels, dragging him forward. 3 miles. "Left soon," the voice whispered, now so loud it felt like it was inside his skull. The sound rattled in his teeth, pressed into the back of his eyes. He swallowed hard, hands locked on the wheel. "What's there?" The voice didn't answer directly. It only said, "Closer." 2 mile. The glow ahead pulsed once, faintly, and for the briefest moment the outline of something impossibly tall flashed against the sky. Gone before he could register it. 1 mile. The whisper was no longer a whisper. It was a low, rolling command that drowned out the engine itself. "Turn now." The tires screamed as he slammed the brakes, the rig's weight surging forward, rattling every loose bolt and panel. The engine choked back from its roar to a deep idle, the speed bleeding away until the truck shuddered to a full, trembling halt. And then, silence. The voice was gone. No rasp between the gears, no hidden syllables in the drone of the engine. Just the faint ping of cooling metal under the hood and the hiss of the air brakes. He sat there gripping the wheel, every muscle in his arms knotted tight. His chest heaved, lungs aching as if he'd been holding his breath for miles. The desert night around him was unnaturally still. He glanced at the radio. The display glowed a neutral, meaningless frequency. Static, nothing more. It was as though the last half hour had been cut from reality, leaving no evidence behind. For the first time, he noticed how dark it really was. The headlights stretched only a few feet beyond the hood, the world beyond swallowed in an oily blackness. It was like sitting at the edge of something vast and empty. A strange relief washed over him. The absence of the voice was almost intoxicating. He leaned back in the seat, let his shoulders drop. He could think again. Then, for no reason he could explain, his eyes flicked up to the side mirror. At first, there was nothing. Just the soft gleam of the road behind, broken by the shimmer of distant heat waves or maybe the memory of motion. But then, as if a lens had been brought into focus, a shape resolved in the reflection. A person, sitting on the hood of his truck. The figure was completely still, hunched slightly forward, as though waiting. The cab's roof light wasn't on, yet somehow he could see the pale contour of a face. No detail, no expression. Just a void where features should be. His breath hitched. He turned his head to look directly at the hood, half expecting to see nothing. But the glass didn't lie. In the mirror, the figure remained. In reality, the space beyond the windshield was empty. Or maybe it wasn't. He leaned closer to the glass, his forehead nearly touching it. But the mirror's image didn't distort. Whoever, whatever, was there seemed to exist only in that silvered rectangle of reflected light. A dozen thoughts fought for dominance. Jump out and check, hit the gas, keep staring until it went away. But his body felt heavy, almost pinned to the seat by an invisible hand. The engine ticked softly. The mirror shimmered. And then the figure's head tilted, slowly, deliberately, as though curious about why he had stopped. His skin went cold. The movement wasn't mechanical or jerky. It was patient, knowing. Without thinking, he flicked his eyes away from the mirror. He could feel a pressure in the air now, like the cab had sealed itself shut, trapping him inside with something he couldn't see directly. The temptation to look again was unbearable. Finally, he gave in and darted a glance back to the mirror. The figure was gone. The hood was empty. But before he could take a breath of relief, he caught the faintest impression in the glass, not on the hood this time, but closer, much closer. A ghost of a shape leaning forward, as if peering into the cab from just outside the door. The hair on the back of his neck rose. And in that moment, the engine, unprompted, began to rev. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's next.